Today on the program, if Congress redefines marriage in federal law, what would the immediate impact be for religious freedom? We're going to talk about that today. Congressman Bob Good will stop by to give us his advice for how the Republican Party should be responding to this attempt to repeal the Defense of Marriage Act. Also, should Christians care about the legal definition of marriage, since the biblical definition of marriage will never change? We'll talk about that today in our Worldview conversation with David Clausen at the end of the program. But first, our headlines. It was indeed a busy week for House Democrats as they passed, with a discouraging level of Republican support, a bill to redefine natural marriage as well as a bill to protect and promote abortion under the guise of the so-called right to contraception.
This week, we passed, as you know, the legislation to respect marriage, to actually debunk the so-called Defense of Marriage Act and enshrine the respect for marriage in our law.
It seems Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi thinks she's identified wedge issues, both to split the Republican Party and to fire up her left-wing base as we head toward the November midterm elections. With me now to discuss this is U.S. Representative Dan Bishop, who's a member of the House Judiciary Committee and the Homeland Security Committee. He represents the 9th Congressional District of North Carolina. Congressman Bishop, welcome back to the program.
Hi, Joseph. I'm glad to be with you today.
What is your reaction to the events of this week? I don't think anyone saw this coming a couple weeks ago. How are you taking it all in?
Yeah, the Democrats are pulling out all the stops right now, Joseph. They want to get it's interesting. If a party suffered as badly in the polls as they do, if it were Republicans, we'd be trying to backpedal. Democrats always go harder and harder at the same radical goalpost. So we've had, I've been in the Judiciary Committee. They've got a gun ban, really widespread weapons in common use. They want to ban, and also the contraception bill that was in your news stories, and then this ridiculous bill trying to redefine marriage, or redefining marriage in terms of Congress. The Supreme Court already has done that, obviously, and this is unnecessary, but it also is quite dangerous.
In one sense, I'm glad that this is being discussed because I think it's helpful that Americans understand this is not a settled issue. I want to do a little bit of history for the audience today and go back to just 2008. Here's what then Vice Presidential candidate Joe Biden had to say. Let's play clip one.
Let's try to avoid nuance, Senator. Do you support gay marriage?
No, Barack Obama nor I support redefining from a civil side what constitutes marriage. We do not support.
Congressman Bishop, that was just 14 years ago. We now know how President Biden feels about that issue, as well as everyone in the Democratic Party who unanimously voted to redefine the definition of marriage. Why do you think things have changed so quickly?
Well, of course, you have the couple of decisions from the United States Supreme Court. The first one that invalidated the federal law called the Defense of Marriage Act, which had, as these cases started rolling out in state courts across the country, the Defense of Marriage Act had tried to say from a federal point of view that for federal law purposes, marriage was between man and a woman. The Supreme Court invalidated that. And then, of course, in 2015, in the Obergefell case, declared that gay marriage was the law under the Constitution. A ridiculous decision. It's as ridiculous now as it was the day that it was entered. But now the Democrats have detected, they've put that win in the bag, and then they've gone, we see things going way further. You see the transgender ideology pervasive. You see in public schools, teachers trying to indoctrinate young kids with it. You see the resulting confusion in alarmingly increasing rates. And then you begin to hear about even crazier stuff like thruples and polygamy and the like. So what this bill would do is not only repeal the same law that the Supreme Court invalidated, the Defense of Marriage Act, but it would require every state in the nation to give full respect and effect to any crazy idea of marriage that any other state, say Vermont or someplace like that, might come up with. So it's a very damaging thing, and it keeps pushing the culture deeper into destruction of the marriage, of the family unit, and that undermines societal stability.
You know, it is important, I think, to understand the history of this issue. For those of us who were involved in the debates around the definition of marriage a decade or so ago, we were called alarmists for suggesting that religious freedom might be affected. Now it's the expectation that religious freedom would be affected. And now we see people defending the idea that adults should be able to twerk in front of 5-year-olds and people should be okay with that. If anything, the risks of this were understated at the time that marriage was being debated. The definition was being debated. But now, as you know, this week, 47 of your House Republican colleagues sided with the Democrats in voting to repeal, effectively in state statute, the Defense of Marriage Act. Do you see that as a pragmatic political decision that's going to help them in their upcoming elections, or have they taken a trap, fallen into a trap set by Nancy Pelosi?
First point I want to say, Joseph, is how absolutely astute and correct you are in how you just summed it up. But as to the political impact and Republicans' decision making, this is a tremendous misunderstanding. Republicans seem to want to worry about what the mainstream press will say about them, or whatever. Who they need to be worried about is Americans of traditional values who are tired of being steamrolled by government. They expect Republicans to stand up for them, and they become exhausted and frustrated trying to support Republicans when Republicans seem to bail on them at the first. It can be so easily stampeded. We're getting ready to see the United States Senate take up this bill. We've seen several senators, including Senator Tillis from my state, announce he'll support it. Several Republicans. That cannot happen. And I hope that the American people will be speaking up, contacting their senators and telling them, do not support this radical bill. 47 of my colleagues shouldn't have done it in the House.
Yeah. And that's a great reminder for everyone watching and listening. You can go to frcaction.org/marriage right now. There's an action center that will make it really simple for you to connect with your members of Congress and share your perspective on this issue. We encourage you to do so. Again, the website is frcaction.org/marriage. Now, Senator Schumer this week had to say that he believes that this measure is important because of Republican plans. Let's go ahead and play clip 4, and then, Congressman, I want you to respond to this.
The MAGA Republicans that are taking over the Republican Party have made it abundantly clear they're not satisfied with repealing Roe. As many have openly said, they have now turned their attention on the Obergefell decision and marriage equality.
Congressman Bishop, what's your reaction to that?
Well, I don't know that anybody's turned their attention to Obergefell. It's hard for me to see exactly what the route would be to take on Obergefell, but I think they may have given it to us. So in other words, when they passed this new law, let me tell you, Joseph, the one thing the founders of the Republic did not do was confer on the federal Congress the power to decide what marriage is. So they may have opened the window to an attack or to a challenge to Obergefell. That'd be just fine with me. But I don't think there's any such plan. I think it's Democrat hysteria, and they want to use the opportunity to try to drive their social agenda farther. And again, Republicans should have enough sense to stand up to that.
I certainly agree with that, and I know many Americans do. Congressman Bishop, one other subject I wanted to discuss with you this week, the House also passed legislation, emergency legislation in their mind. They suspended the rules to do so, creating the so-called right to contraception. What's your reaction to what they're trying to do there?
Same sort of deal. In that case, Joseph, what is obviously possible under the bill they offered is that the so-called chemical abortion drugs that they want to be able to move abortion to a point that state governments, that people in their states cannot have a say, as the Supreme Court has said rightfully that that's where the decision belongs. They want to sort of drive it underground so that Planned Parenthood and the abortion industry can find a way to facilitate abortion by other means. And so they talk about contraception. It's way beyond contraception. They want to use it as a backdoor to forcing in abortion, even in those states that may decide to limit or ban it.
And there's another really important part of that legislation that people need to understand is the Democrat leadership wrote into this bill that it would supersede the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. And that, of course, is legislation from 1993 that said the government could not compel people to do things that violated their conscience. And this legislation specifically says that doctors or pharmacists can be required to do things that violate their conscience when it comes to the provision of abortifacients, chemical abortion drugs, things like that. Do you agree that the real goal here is to try to distract people about contraception, and then also, but really they want to just get at the religious freedom issue and be able to force people to do things that present law says they are free to do?
Again, Joseph, I think you have it exactly right. There are a number of, it's a Trojan horse in a number of respects, and the one you just articulated is one. It's interesting when when RFRA passed in 1993, it passed on voice vote in both chambers. In other words, essentially unanimously, unanimous consent in effect. And it has been an extraordinarily important law for many reasons, but Democrats now despise it. They despise your right under the First Amendment to worship, just as they despise your right to keep and bear arms under the Second Amendment. They really don't like conservatives having the right to speak under the First Amendment. So, it's a constant attack on rights. They like to cloak it or costume or disguise it so that it seems less alarming. But believe me, they are coming for your rights, especially Christians, especially.
Congressman Dan Bishop, thank you so much for your time today. We greatly appreciate your leadership as always.
Thank you, Joseph. It's a pleasure being with you.